Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you're listening, I'm going to bet you know this feeling.
Oh, intimate.
Intimately, right. That looming deadline. The guilt that, it feels almost physical.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's heavy. And then that bizarre urge to do literally anything else. Clean the grout in the bathroom, organize an inbox from 2009.
Or decide this is the perfect time to learn ancient Greek.
Exactly. That's the one. It's just this constant internal tug of war.
It's the classic cycle, isn't it? The avoidance and then the, beating yourself up about it afterwards. It's universal.
It really is.
And for so many of us, especially, high achievers or perfectionists, the traditional productivity advice.
Just try harder.
Just try harder or get a more rigid system. It doesn't just fail. It actually makes the problem worse. It just increases that whole sense of burden.
Exactly. We have all been there. We've tried every system from the most complicated digital planners to aggressive to-do lists. And we just fall short, feel like a personal failure, and end up feeling even worse. But today, we're going to hit the reset button on this whole thing.
A total reset.
Our source for this deep dive is this really foundational psychological framework. It's Dr. Neil Fiore's The Now Habit, Overcoming Procrastination Through Psychological Safety.
A classic for a reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're here to get you that shortcut, the core insights, the essential nuggets, so you can stop fighting with yourself and maybe start understanding yourself.
And that's the key, because this book is so fundamentally different from almost every other productivity guide out there. Our mission today is really to unpack this compassionate, psychologically grounded approach.
Compassion is a good word for it.
It is, because the radical shift Fiore proposes is, it's revolutionary in how simple it is. Stop focusing on working harder.
Stop trying to be more disciplined.
Exactly. That's the wrong fight. You're just treating the symptom when you do that.
Okay, so if that's the wrong fight, what's the right one? What's the real mission here?
The mission is to start focusing on reducing the internal environment of fear and guilt and pressure. We're moving the whole conversation away from discipline and willpower, which are finite, right?
They run out.
They absolutely run out. And we're moving it into the realm of mental and emotional safety, which is something you can actually regenerate.
That is a huge, huge shift right from the start. Because most of us, I think, have internalized this idea that procrastination is a character flaw.
Oh, 100%.
You think I'm lazy or I lack discipline or I'm just a disorganized person. But Fiore gives this profoundly different and honestly a much kinder explanation.
He reframes the entire thing. It is not laziness. It is not a failure of time management. He defines it as a powerful and often necessary coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism.
Yes, it stems from these deeper, often unconscious fears. So when your brain senses a threat, and that could be the potential for failure, the weight of judgment, or even just the loss of your own freedom, it does the most logical thing in the world.
It avoids the source of the threat.
It avoids it completely. Procrastination, by this definition, is a profoundly self-preserving defensive move.
So, okay, if the goal is to be productive, but sustainably productive, the path isn't through more pressure or a scarier to-do list.
No.
It's about creating an environment, inside your own head where your brain can actually associate starting work with safety.
With safety and manageable activity instead of threat and this overwhelming stress.
Let's dive into that framework.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's really unpack this core idea. Procrastination is not the problem.
Right.
It's not the disease. It's more like the warning light on your car's dashboard. It's just signaling something deeper is wrong under the hood. It's a symptom.
Precisely. And that's key lesson number 1 from the book. And it's where we so often get stuck. We waste so much time and energy fighting the symptom, the avoidance, usually by shaming ourselves.
Which means we never get to the root cause.
Never. The real issues are psychological. They're about chronic, ingrained self-criticism and these powerful underlying fears about our performance and our self-worth.
I want to push back a little on the word fear, though, because, on the surface, when I'm avoiding a boring report, I don't feel like I'm running from a tiger.
Yeah.
I just feel guilty.
Yeah.
What kind of fears are we really talking about?
That's a great question, because the fears are subtle. They're not, pure terror. But psychologically, they're immense. We're talking about those deep-seated anxieties that latch onto performance.
Okay.
So there's the classic fear of failure, of course, the idea that if I try this, I might just mess it up. But Fiore adds these really important nuances.
Like what?
Well, he identifies the fear of active failure. That's where you try your absolute hardest, you give it your all, and the result is still mediocre.
And that would confirm your deepest fear that you just weren't good enough to begin with.
Exactly. But then there's also the fear of passive failure, which is actually what procrastination is. If you never submit the report, you can always tell yourself the failure was because of circumstances. I ran out of time, not because you lacked competence.
So by procrastinating, you're actually protecting your own self-image of being confident. You can always say, oh, I could have done a great job if only I'd started sooner.
That is the exact psychological shield. But then there's the most counterintuitive one of all. The fear of success.
The fear of success. That sounds completely absurd.
It does, but think about it. Success brings with it new and often overwhelming expectations.
A higher bar for next time.
A much higher bar, more pressure. If you do an amazing job on this project, the next one has to be even better. Success can feel like you're signing a contract for more work and more anxiety in the future.
Wow. Okay, that changes everything. So it's not that I hate the work itself. It's that the work represents this huge, unpredictable burden.
That's the core conflict you want to achieve, but your brain's defense system is stronger. Let's look at the psychological chain reaction here.
Okay.
When you feel like you're operating under constant judgment, either from yourself or from others, your brain doesn't see a task as just a neutral thing to do.
It sees it as something else.
It links the work directly to danger, to threat, to stress, and this is critical to the loss of your personal freedom and autonomy. The task becomes the thing that's going to rob you of your free time, your peace of mind.
So the brain gets this signal. Danger. If I start this, I might fail. I might be judged as not good enough, and I will definitely lose all my free time until this thing is done.
Exactly. And if work equals that level of stress and threat, then the most logical self-preserving action your brain can take is that defensive move, procrastination. It gives you this immediate, temporary
Relief.
a surprisingly powerful relief from that psychological pain. So in this model, procrastination is a necessary form of psychological self-defense. You're defending your self-worth and your autonomy from an overwhelming threat.
That completely changes the way we should look at traditional productivity advice.
It has to.
Because if the usual advice is, you need a tougher deadline, you need to shame yourself into starting, you're just adding more pressure. You're adding more threat to a system that's already overloaded with it.
You are absolutely pouring fuel on the fire. Traditional advice feeds that negative cycle that traps people. More pressure leads to more fear, which forces more avoidance, and that avoidance creates crippling guilt.
And the cycle starts over.
Fiore's approach is designed to interrupt that cycle at the very source. It's about reducing that emotional weight, because if the task genuinely feels safe, your brain has no reason to avoid it.
And nothing adds more emotional weight than key lesson number 2. Guilt destroys productivity. And boy, are we experts at shaming ourselves into doing nothing.
We are. We build these little mental torture chambers, and it's completely scientifically counterproductive. The analysis is crystal clear on this. The more you shame yourself,
I'm so lazy, I'm worthless for not starting this.
all of that, the more you do that, the more your brain reinforces the link between that task and immense emotional pain. This self-flagellation becomes a core part of that vicious cycle.
So you feel guilty, which makes the task feel heavier, which makes you avoid it more, which makes you feel even more guilty.
It's a downward spiral straight into despair and, just being totally stuck.
So if the key is breaking that cycle, the first step has to be removing the guilt. But how do you just turn off guilt, especially when a huge deadline is really looming?
Well, you don't turn it off like a light switch, but you interrupt its power by changing your internal dialogue. The book argues that you have to replace that chronic self-criticism with genuine self-trust.
Self-trust.
Yeah, when you start beating yourself up for the moments you don't work, and instead you just give yourself permission to start small and imperfectly, you immediately lower the emotional stakes.
And that leads to sustainable productivity.
That's what readers always point to in reviews. It's not just that they're getting things done, they're learning how to do it without that crushing, debilitating self-loathing attached to the whole process.
You shift from, I have to suffer through this to be a good person, to
I choose to start this one small step.
that focus on self-trust is the bridge then. We spend all this time trying to use external tools for what is, at its core, an internal emotional problem.
And now we see the solution has to be an internal psychological one.
So we get why we avoid work now. It's fear, basically, just masquerading as laziness.
Yeah.
So let's transition from the why to the how. How do we approach work safely? Fiore calls this adopting the mindset of a producer.
Right, the producer mindset. And at its heart, it's really all about engineering safety and manageability directly into the work process itself. The very first big shift, key lesson 3, is all about momentum. Producers focus on starting, not on finishing.
Okay, that sounds so simple. But I feel like there's a lot of depth to that. Why is focusing on the finish line so bad for a procrastinator?
Because finishing a big project feels overwhelming. It feels like this all or nothing commitment that demands perfection.
That's infinite.
It feels infinite and impossible. Your brain immediately sees the sheer size of it, and more importantly, the potential for catastrophic failure if it's not perfect. It just defaults to that threat response. It sees the whole mountain.
But starting
Starting is small. It's controllable. It requires way less psychological buy-in. A procrastinator sees work as this one single huge block. A producer sees it as a collection of tiny, sequential, almost trivial little tasks.
So if I just commit to, say, finding 3 sources for a report or just writing the title, I've started. And I've built this tiny piece of momentum that feels safe.
Exactly. The commitment is finite. The success condition is low stakes. Fiore says you should break the task down into steps so small they feel almost ridiculous.
Why ridiculous?
Because that's how you minimize the resistance. You build momentum and you give your brain these immediate small wins. The goal is traction, not completion. When the goal is completion, you activate the fear of perfectionism. When the goal is just traction, your instinct for motion can take over.
I love that. Okay, moving to the next shift, which is all about the language we use, and this one feels incredibly powerful. Key lesson 5 is replacing I must with I choose.
This one is so critical for restoring that feeling of autonomy, which, as we said, is something the brain fiercely defends. When we use the language of obligation, I must do this, I have to do that, we are basically hitting the resistance button inside our own heads.
It feels like a command.
It feels like a command, and we immediately push back even if we're the ones giving the command. It makes the work feel like something that's being done to you instead of something you are doing for yourself.
That sounds like it connects to that psychological idea
For locus
of control, right?
It connects directly. When you say, I must, your locus of control is external. You feel like you're just reacting to demands from your boss or society or whoever. But when you use the language of choice, I choose to work on this for 30 minutes, you immediately pull that locus of control back inside.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second. If my boss needs a report by 9 a.m. tomorrow, do I really have a choice? That deadline isn't negotiable.
That's the perfect question. The choice isn't about whether the work gets done. The choice is about your approach to the work.
Ah, okay.
You can choose to see that deadline as this unmanageable threat, or you can choose how and when you dedicate your energy to meet it. You choose the starting point. You can say, I choose to start this now because that choice gives me safety later.
So you're regaining power just by changing a verb.
You're shifting from being a victim of your schedule to being the agent in control of your life. And that ties right into key lesson 6, which is how we structure the time itself. Work in small, time-limited chunks.
The practical application of the safety principle.
Yes. Short, defined work sessions are essential because they feel inherently safe to the brain. If you tell yourself, I have to work on this all day until it's done, the task feels like it's going to consume all your time, all your energy, all your freedom.
And that's exactly what the brain's self-defense system is designed to stop. The fear is that the task will just swallow you whole, so the brain just says, nope, shutting down.
Correct. But if you commit to, say, 30 minutes, your brain knows there's a guaranteed exit point. You've set a boundary. The threat is minimized. It becomes a safe commitment. Producers know that consistent, high-quality focus in short bursts gets more done than one long, miserable, guilt-ridden slog.
It's about quality, not just endurance.
Exactly. The emotional cost of starting is so low that the resistance just doesn't build up.
Okay, now we get to what I think is the real cornerstone of this whole philosophy, the one that cuts right through all the modern hustle culture noise.
I think I know which one you mean.
Key lesson 7, separate your worth from your work.
This is the therapeutic heart of the book. It's essential for anyone who calls themselves a perfectionist because they struggle so much with this. They equate the outcome of their work directly with their value as a person.
So if I fail at a task, I am a failure.
Yes. If the proposal is rejected, the thought isn't that the proposal wasn't quite right. It's, I am inadequate. I am unworthy.
And that creates these absolutely catastrophic stakes for every single thing you do.
Of course. If starting a task means you might validate your deepest fear, that you aren't good enough, your brain will choose avoidance every single time. It's an act of psychological survival.
So what's the antidote?
Fiore pushes you to consciously, repeatedly tell yourself this radical truth. You are valuable. You are worthy of rest and happiness in life, even when you are not being productive.
Even when you fail.
Especially when you fail. That separation is what removes the catastrophic emotional weight. Failure becomes a data point, a chance to iterate. It's not a personal indictment.
That is the ultimate psychological safety net. If I know my identity isn't going to shatter, if this presentation is just okay, or I get a B instead of an A, then I'm so much more likely to just start it. The pressure to be perfect just evaporates.
It does. And we can synthesize all this by saying that productivity improves not because we're working harder. It improves because the process of work feels safe and manageable. And our self-worth is intentionally separated from our performance. You're optimizing your emotional relationship with work, not just your calendar.
We've set up the theory. Reduce fear, increase safety, reclaim choice. That's the producer mindset. So now let's get into the practical tools from the book that actually make this happen.
The first and probably the most famous tool Fiore offers is this radical idea called the Unschedule, and it completely flips the traditional calendar on its head.
Right. Traditional scheduling says block out work time first, then maybe squeeze in a break if you've earned it.
Which is all about guilt. The Unschedule is the complete inverse. The priority is scheduling all the non-work stuff first.
The life stuff.
The life stuff. Play, rest, exercise, social time, meals. You block these in as non-negotiable, protected appointments. You treat your gym time with the same sanctity as a meeting with your most important client.
You're prioritizing being a human being first.
Precisely. And then, and only then, does work fill in the gaps. And this is the key. It fills them without pressure. You just mark down when you start and stop work, but the calendar's main focus is on celebrating and protecting your time off.
Okay, I have to challenge this again because this is where my traditional mindset kicks in and resists. If I guarantee myself fun and rest first, how does that actually make me do the hard stuff? Isn't that just encouraging more delay?
It seems so counterintuitive, but it's brilliant. It's psychological safety through certainty. This goes back to key lesson 4. When rest and fun are guaranteed, when they're planned and protected, not something you have to earn through suffering, work feels way less threatening.
Why though?
Because the procrastinator's biggest fear is that work will consume all their time and eliminate all their leisure. The Unschedule removes that fear instantly because it guarantees that your life activities will happen, whether the work is done or not.
So you remove the scarcity mindset. My brain isn't fighting for its survival, for rest and autonomy, because those things are already structurally secured on my calendar.
That is the key psychological benefit. Work just becomes something you choose to do in a protected window, knowing your freedom is intact. You're proving to yourself that you're a whole person, not just a productivity machine.
Reframing relaxation as a prerequisite for work, not a reward for it. That's revolutionary.
It really is.
So that's the structural security. But what about in the moment when you have to start? That brings us to the second tool, the 30-minute work habit.
This is the practical application of that time-limited chunking we talked about. It's all about making a commitment without feeling overloaded. You make a contract with yourself to work for just 30 minutes. And then, and this is important, you must stop, or at least have explicit guilt-free permission to stop and walk away.
So it's not a trick to get yourself to work for hours.
No, it's about building self-trust by honoring that short commitment.
So why 30 minutes? Is that a magic number?
It's just short enough to remove that immense resistance and fear that comes with starting a big task. It's finite, it's manageable, it poses no real threat to your energy or your freedom. The procrastinator's mind needs that safety valve. It's like turning the engine on without demanding you immediately drive across the country.
It's a sprint, not a marathon. And I imagine often once you're 30 minutes in and you've got some momentum,
the resistance collapses.
You naturally choose to keep going because the task isn't that formless monster you imagined anymore.
That's the beautiful side effect. But the initial promise is only 30 minutes. If you continue, great. But the commitment remains small. This shatters the all-consuming task illusion and proves to yourself that you are in control, not the task. It builds massive self-trust.
This all really boils down to reversing that core psychological feedback loop, doesn't it? Let's walk through the negative cycle the book identifies versus the positive one it recommends.
Okay, the negative cycle is the trap. It starts with external or internal pressure. I must do this perfectly. That pressure creates paralyzing fear of failure, of judgment.
Which then mandates total avoidance, procrastination.
Exactly. And that avoidance then fuels this crippling guilt and self-criticism, which just starts the whole cycle over again, but with more pressure this time.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of misery, all fueled by fear. So what's the positive replacement cycle?
It starts with choice, replacing must with choose. This establishes your control. That choice generates safety because the task is now seen as manageable and finite thanks to the Unschedule and the 30-minute chunks.
And safety allows for guilt-free action.
Right. You can actually start. And that successful small action leads directly to genuine confidence and self-trust, which then encourages the next choice, reinforcing the whole positive loop.
The big difference there is that the positive cycle is self-reinforcing. It builds on trust, not on the exhausting, fragile mechanism of self-criticism. And the whole thing hinges on establishing that core feeling of safety before you even start.
So now that we've deconstructed the philosophy and the tools, it's worth asking, who does this actually benefit most? Because it's not just for disorganized people.
The source is pretty specific about this. It's obviously for the chronic procrastinators, the people who've tried every planner and app and just feel stuck.
Absolutely. But it is especially powerful for perfectionists.
Why them specifically?
Because perfectionism is, at its root, fear-driven. This whole safety model directly targets their biggest problem. That huge fear of failure and the habit of tying their self-worth to a perfect outcome. When you separate worth from work, you disarm the perfectionist's anxiety. It allows them to tolerate the imperfection of just starting.
It's revolutionary for them.
Think about a writer or an artist facing a blank page. That blank page is terrifying because it feels like a canvas where their entire identity will be judged.
But with these tools,
they can say, I am choosing to devote 30 minutes to imperfect, guilt-free creation, and then I will rest no matter what happens.
and it's also incredibly relevant for students under pressure and creatives who fear judgment.
Exactly. For both groups, the ability to work in these small, safe chunks with guaranteed time off transforms the experience from this high-stakes endurance test into just a manageable series of choices. For people who felt really wounded by hustle culture advice, this framework is often described as life-changing.
It's like a permission slip to be human and imperfect.
It really is.
Now, speaking of the book's context, let's talk about some of the common criticisms. No book is perfect, right?
Right. And the main criticisms are usually about its presentation and its age. Some modern readers feel the writing style is a bit dated.
And what about a more substantial criticism?
The big one is that it has less emphasis on modern digital distractions. Social media, smartphones, constant notifications. Those things just weren't the focus when the book was first published.
That's a fair point. But I'd argue the psychology is timeless. The technology we use to distract ourselves is just the newest, most effective tool for avoidance.
I completely agree.
The device has changed, from staring out the window to scrolling TikTok.
Yeah.
But the reason we seek that distraction is the same. It's an immediate, low-risk escape from the pressure.
Exactly. We can connect the dots. Why is social media so addictive for a procrastinator? Because it offers an instant, low-stakes reward, a little dopamine hit with zero fear of failure attached. It's the perfect psychological hideout from the high-stakes task you're supposed to be doing.
So even though Fiore didn't talk about smartphones, his framework perfectly explains why the smartphone is such a powerful self-defense weapon.
And that just reinforces the book's timeless strength. It requires deep mindset shifts, not quick hacks. It addresses the internal state, the engine, not just the external symptoms.
So if we synthesize this whole deep dive, what's the core value proposition of the Now Habit? What's the central truth?
I think it's the realization that you cannot shame or pressure yourself into sustainable productivity. Those methods are short-lived, and they just destroy your self-esteem in the process.
So it's not about forcing anything.
Not at all. The Now Habit doesn't force productivity. It heals the emotional causes of procrastination by reducing fear, guilt, and self-criticism. It teaches you how to build a healthier, safer, more trusting relationship with your work. And that, in turn, allows you to become truly productive, operating from a place of choice and safety, not obligation and dread.
And that shift from seeing procrastination as a moral failing to seeing it as a psychological signal that your brain is just asking for safety, that's the most profound takeaway.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been incredibly illuminating. We've learned the secret to starting isn't about punishing ourselves, but about intentionally protecting ourselves from the threat that work can represent.
The essential shift is clear. Procrastination is fear-driven avoidance.
And the solution is about cultivating choice, manufacturing safety through scheduling and prioritizing your life first.
And by internalizing that fear is the fuel, you finally get a clear understanding of why all that traditional productivity advice failed you. It just increased the threat level, which strengthened your brain's natural defense mechanism.
It's this radical idea that putting your playtime and your rest first is actually the most efficient path to getting hard work done.
You guarantee your recovery, which makes the work manageable.
You reclaim your freedom before you even begin.
And that is what we want to leave you, the learner, with today. This final, powerful truth to really consider, taken right from the core of this producer mindset.
You don't need more discipline.
Discipline is the finite resource you keep running out of.
What you actually need
Is more structural safety, more genuine self-trust, and more radical permission to start small and finite and imperfectly. Stop trying to earn your rest through guilt and start using your choice to define your own boundaries. That is where sustainable, guilt-free productivity truly begins.